Have you ever wondered why ancient castles and medieval homes had such tiny windows? Were people simply afraid of sunlight? Or was there a far more practical reason hidden behind those thick stone walls? Tonight, you'll step into a world of freezing winters, smoky halls, costly glass, and constant fears of raids, where every inch of a window could mean the difference between comfort and survival. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy relaxing medieval history stories like these. It really helps support the journey. Now let's settle in, lower the lights, and let's discover why the people of the Middle Ages chose to live behind such narrow frames of light. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself beneath a low winter sky, standing before the outer ditch of a medieval castle, while cold mist crawls up from the river and gathers around your boots. The road behind you is a ribbon of churned mud, the kind that remembers every cartwheel, hoof print, and bad decision made since dawn. Damp straw clings to your cloak. Smoke hangs in the rafters of the nearby gate shed. Somewhere beyond the walls, a bell sounds from a chapel tower, slow and bronze and tired. As if even the bell would rather be in bed. A torch gutters in the wind, throwing orange light over wet stone, iron hinges, and the horse breath steaming beside you. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You flex your cold fingers and realize gently but firmly that you probably would not last a week out here without modern socks, reliable plumbing, and a heroic amount of luck. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the guards decide whether you look harmless, suspicious, or merely damp, tell us in the comments where you're listening from and what the local time is where your own night has found you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand with your shoulders tucked close, watching the castle rise above you in layers of blackening stone. It is not graceful at first glance. It does not spread itself wide to welcome you. It crouches on the hill like some ancient animal with its knees drawn in, its towers blunt and heavy, its walls thick enough to make even the wind pause and reconsider. The windows are the first thing you notice, because there are so few of them, and because they are so small. They look less like windows than careful wounds in the masonry, narrow cuts of darkness high above the road, some no wider than a man's hand, some crossed with iron, some shuttered tight against the coming night. From where you stand, shivering beside a cart loaded with sacks of barley, it seems almost unkind. All that stone, all that height, and hardly any open place for light. You're used to houses that drink in the day through broad panes, rooms that let morning spill across floors, warm squares of sun where a sleepy dog might lie. Here, the castle keeps its eyes narrowed. It peers out at the world without offering much in return. A gate guard leans from a little slit above the arch and calls down, asking your business in a voice flattened by cold and suspicion. You give the answer you've been told to give. You are travelling with the Reeves cart, carrying a message and 2 small bundles wrapped in waxed cloth. This is mostly true, which in medieval travel counts as refreshing honesty. The guard vanishes, chains creak. Somewhere inside the gatehouse, a bolt is dragged back with the slow complaint of iron that has seen too many winters. While you wait, the man beside you, a carter with a red nose and a fur-lined cap that has known better generations, nods toward the wall. Small windows, he mutters, as if continuing a conversation you never began. Keeps the warmth in, keeps arrows out, keeps fools from climbing in after dark. No one can quite agree whether he means you, the road, or the entire human race. The portcullis lifts just high enough for the cart to pass, and you duck beneath it, feeling the cold teeth of the iron grille above your head. Inside the gate passage, the air changes, smells of torch smoke, damp stone, horse leather, and old straw packed into corners where servants have tried, with touching optimism, to defeat the weather. The walls press close. Tiny openings pierce them at odd angles, not made for comfort, not made for gazing at sunsets, but made for watching, aiming, listening. The castle does not simply have windows, it has suspicions carved into stone. You step into the lower yard as dusk thickens. Chickens scratch near a woodpile. A boy in a patched wool tunic carries a pail of water with both hands, spilling half of it and looking deeply betrayed by physics. A dog appears from nowhere, ribby and mud-footed, and begins following you with the solemn confidence of an unpaid guide. Above, along the inner wall, the narrow windows catch the last grey light. They glow faintly, like slivers of pewter. Behind one, someone moves a candle, and the flame shines for a moment through the gap before disappearing behind a shutter. Already you begin to understand. A wide window in such a place would be a luxury, but also an invitation. It would invite the wind, the cold, the rain, the arrow, the thief, the curious neighbour, and every wandering bit of bad luck that old women by the hearth swear travels after sunset. A small window is not a failure of imagination. It is a bargain, a little light in exchange for much safety, a little air in exchange for keeping winter on the proper side of the wall. You cross the yard toward the keep, boots sucking softly in mud. Rushes have been scattered near the entrance to keep the worst of the wet from being carried indoors, though they are already losing the war. A servant opens an oak door banded with iron, and warmth breathes out, smoky and human. It wraps around your face with the smell of beeswax, pottage, damp wool, and the faint sourness of many bodies living close together because loneliness is colder than company. Inside, the passage is dim. Your eyes adjust slowly. There are candles in wall niches, but not many. Beeswax is costly, tallow stinks, and nobody here burns light just because a traveller prefers seeing where his feet are going. The windows are narrow, deep set, and angled through the thickness of the wall, so that a pale line of evening presses in and dies halfway across the floor. The stone around each opening is cold to the touch. You place your fingers there and feel the chill stored inside it. A whole day of winter held in silence. Some swear that if you sleep too close to an open window, night air creeps into your bones and makes your joints ache before spring. Others say moonlight falling on a cradle can make a baby restless, or that a draught across the neck invites fever. The castle folk half believe such things and half laugh at them, which is a very medieval way of handling uncertainty. Mock the superstition, then follow it carefully just in case. A maid with a bundle of rushes brushes past you and tells the dog to leave. The dog does not leave. It merely changes its official position from following you to guarding the doorway, which seems to satisfy its sense of law. You're led into a chamber where a small fire burns low beneath soot-blackened rafters. The window here is shuttered from within, the wooden panels fastened by a peg around the edges. The wind worries at tiny gaps and whistles just enough to remind everyone that walls are not promises, only negotiations. You sit on a bench near the hearth and warm your hands. The carter lowers himself beside you with a groan that belongs to a man, a cart, and possibly the entire feudal system. Someone gives you a heel of coarse bread and a wooden bowl of pottage thick with peas, onions, and something smoky that may once have had a more specific identity. You eat because you are cold, because it is warm, and because in this world refusing food is the sort of pride that gets corrected quickly, beyond the little shutter, darkness gathers against the castle. You imagine the tiny windows from outside again, scattered high in the walls like cautious stars. They seem meaner than modern windows, yes, but also wiser in their own severe way. In a world of raiders, storms, expensive glass, smoky fires, thin blankets, and winter winds sharp enough to make saints reconsider their vows, a small window is a kind of mercy, not a generous mercy, more like the sort given by a strict aunt with keys at her belt, but mercy all the same. The chapel bell sounds again, softer now through stone. You lean closer to the fire. Smoke curls upward and loses itself in the dark beams. The dog sighs by the door as if it has carried you all this way personally, and somewhere above, behind a narrow slit of wall, a watchman looks out into the mist, seeing little, revealing less, while the castle holds its warmth, its secrets, and its narrow light close against the night. The bell's final note seems to linger in the beams long after the sound itself has faded. You sit for a while beside the hearth, warming fingers that still remember the cold stone outside, while the castle settles into its evening rhythm. Boots scrape across flagstones. A servant carries a basket of kindling through the passage. Somewhere deeper in the keep, a door closes with a hollow thud that echoes through the walls like a distant drum. The little dog by the doorway has now decided that you belong to it. It follows when you stand. It follows when you cross the room. It follows when you attempt to ignore it. This arrangement appears entirely one-sided. A young servant finally arrives with the lantern and informs you that the steward wishes the Reeves message delivered before the night meal. Since you happen to be the traveller attached to the message, you are invited or perhaps gently captured into accompanying him. The lantern's flame bobs ahead as you leave the warmth of the chamber. The dog follows. You pass through narrow corridors hidden inside the thickness of the walls themselves. This surprises you. From outside, the castle seems solid stone. From within, it reveals pockets, passages, stairways, and chambers tucked into places that looked impossible. The walls are enormous. In some places, the window openings cut through so much masonry that they form little tunnels of stone. A person can sit inside the recess and look out while remaining almost entirely hidden. You pause beside one such opening. Outside, darkness spreads across the lower bailey. Torches flicker near the stables. A cart is being unloaded by men whose complaints travel upward more efficiently than the grain sacks themselves. The window is scarcely wider than your shoulders, yet the wall surrounding it is thick enough that you feel as though you're peering through a cave. Now the purpose becomes clearer. The castle is not trying to collect light. The castle is trying to survive. The servant notices your curiosity. "Good place to watch," he says. You glance at the opening. Not much of a view. He shrugs. If someone shoots at you, that's a fine view. A difficult argument to refute. The stair turns upward. You climb behind him through a spiral staircase winding inside a tower. The steps are uneven from centuries of boots. The centre is worn smooth. The outer edges remain rough where countless feet have avoided slipping. A candle burns in a niche halfway up. Its tiny flame struggles against the draughts. Even here, tiny openings appear at intervals in the wall, not proper windows, merely slits. Enough to admit a little air. Enough to admit a little light. Not enough to admit trouble. The higher you climb, the more you begin noticing how deliberate everything is. Nothing in this castle exists by accident. The narrow stairs force visitors to move single file. The thick doors slow intruders. The low ceilings trap warmth. The tiny windows limit weakness. Modern people often imagine castles as grand residences first and fortresses second. Standing here, your knees reminding you that medieval architects had no particular concern for future travellers, you realise the opposite is often true. Comfort exists, but comfort comes after survival. You emerge into the upper gatehouse. The room smells of lamp oil, damp wool, and old leather. 3 guards occupy the chamber. One sharpens a knife. One warms his hands over a brazier. One peers through a long, narrow slit overlooking the approach road. The slit is much taller than it is wide. From outside, it would barely be visible. From within, however, it provides a surprisingly useful field of view. The guard gestures for you to look. You step carefully into the recess. The road stretches away through the darkness. Moonlight glimmers faintly on puddles. The river beyond reflects a silver thread between banks of mist. You can see travellers approaching long before they reach the gate. Yet anyone below would struggle to spot the observer hidden inside. The castle watches without exposing itself, like an elderly cat pretending to nap while monitoring absolutely everything. The sharpening guard snorts. The road's quiet. That's because everyone's sensible enough to be indoors. Or frozen. Same thing. The conversation ends there, which feels appropriate. Medieval people are often economical with words when cold. A messenger arrives and exchanges news with the guards. Bandits have been reported several villages away. A merchant caravan is expected in 2 days. A bridge downstream may need repairs. Small pieces of information, yet each matters. A castle depends on seeing trouble before trouble arrives. Those narrow openings in the walls are part of that vigilance. You begin to understand why large windows remain rare. Every opening weakens the fortress. Every gap creates risk. The stone itself is protection. Removing too much of it defeats the purpose of building such massive walls in the first place. The steward eventually receives the message and dismisses you with little ceremony. Important medieval officials rarely waste time pretending to be friendly. As you descend again, the lantern light dances across the rough stone. The dog waits faithfully at the bottom. No one can quite agree whether it belongs to the castle, the stable, the kitchen, or some long-forgotten saint. Like many medieval dogs, it seems governed primarily by personal opinion. You continue wandering before supper. The lower gate passage draws your attention. Earlier, you hurried through it. Now you examine it properly. The space resembles a tunnel carved through the wall itself. Above are murder holes grimly named openings through which defenders could observe or attack anyone trapped below. Small chambers overlook the passage from either side. Again, the windows are tiny. Again, observation matters more than scenery. The whole structure feels less like a building and more like a machine designed for caution. Outside, rain begins. At first only a few drops. Then many. The sound patters against roofs and stone. Servants hurry across the yard carrying baskets beneath cloaks. Stable boys secure shutters. A woman gathering herbs near the kitchens mutters that rain after sunset brings clearer weather tomorrow. Some swear that if the first owl call of the evening comes before the rain, the storm will be brief. Others insist the opposite. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. The rain strengthens. You step beneath the shelter of an archway and watch it fall. One of the gatehouse guards joins you. For a while neither of you speaks. The rain does most of the conversation. Finally he nods toward the walls. Imagine windows twice as wide. You do. The rain would lash through. The wind would howl. Heat would vanish. And in dangerous times, arrows could follow. The guard seems pleased you understand. Exactly. The two of you continue watching. Torchlight flickers against wet stone. Water streams from gargoyles carved generations ago. The courtyard empties. The castle draws inward. This is another thing the tiny windows accomplish. They make the building feel secure, contained, protected from the enormous darkness beyond the walls. You think about the cottages scattered across the countryside, the monasteries hidden among forests, the manor houses crouched against winter fields. Many of them will have similarly small windows for similar reasons. Not because people dislike sunlight, not because they lack imagination, but because warmth, safety, and practicality carry greater value than a broad view, especially when glass is expensive, especially when storms are common, especially when the nearest repairman might live 3 days away and arrive only after finishing his cousin's roof. The rain continues. The castle glows softly behind its narrow openings. Each window reveals only a sliver of light. A candle here, a hearth there. Tiny golden wounds in the darkness. From the outside they appear modest. From within they feel precious. You find yourself appreciating them more with every passing minute. Not despite their smallness. Because of it. And as the evening deepens and the bell prepares once more to mark the passing hours, you follow the familiar dog back toward the warmth of the hall, leaving the watchful gatehouse behind while its narrow eyes continue staring into the rainy medieval night. You return to the great hall with rain still whispering against the castle walls, though inside the sound softens into something almost gentle, as if the storm has been folded in wool and set far away. The dog trots ahead of you with the proud bounce of a creature who believes it arranged the weather, the gatehouse tour, and possibly the invention of supper. You follow through the low doorway and step once more into warmth, smoke, and the slow breathing life of the household. The hall is larger than the chamber where you first warmed your hands, but it feels no less crowded by shadow. Flames rise in the central hearth, licking at split logs that hiss whenever dampness inside them remembers the forest. Above, smoke climbs lazily toward the dark rafters, where it gathers in blue-grey layers before finding its way out through a roof vent with the patience of an elderly pilgrim. It does not all escape. Much of it stays. It hangs beneath the beams, stains the timber, stings the eyes, flavours the air, and reminds every guest that medieval ventilation is less a science than a hopeful suggestion. You settle near the lower tables, where servants, carters, messengers, and lesser household folk take their places. Rushes cover the stone floor beneath your boots, mixed with sweet herbs that release a tired fragrance when stepped upon lavender, meadow sweet, perhaps a little rosemary. Someone tells you the herbs keep away fleas. Someone else says they keep away sorrow. Even now, it is hard to tell whether either claim has been properly tested, though both are pleasant enough to believe after a wet road. The windows of the hall sit high in the walls, narrow and deeply recessed. At this hour they reveal nothing of the outside world except blackness. By day, they must admit thin shafts of light, pale and angled, but now they are closed with wooden shutters fitted into the stone. Around their edges, the wind presses and mutters, yet very little enters. That is the point. The hall may be smoky, crowded, and dim, but it is warm enough that fingers loosen, shoulders drop, and people begin to sound human again. A servant brings trenchers of stale bread to serve as plates. Another follows with pottage, thick and steaming, ladled from a pot large enough to bathe a knight, though one hopes no knight has tested this. There is smoked fish, coarse salt, onions roasted near the embers, and ale poured into wooden cups. The ale is weak but welcome. A man near you lifts his cup and squints at it with suspicion, as if it has personally disappointed him before. He drinks anyway. Medieval trust is often practical rather than emotional. As you eat, your eyes keep returning to the windows. You think of the broad glass panes of another age, bright rooms, curtains stirring in summer air, sunlight lying generously across polished floors. Here, light is rationed, air is measured, the walls decide how much of the world may enter. Yet sitting among these people, with your bowl warming your knees and the storm held outside, you feel the wisdom of such restraint. A wide opening would make the hall brighter. Yes, it would also invite the wind straight through the gathering, scatter rushes, chill the pottage, smoke the room worse by disturbing the fire's draught, and make every old aunt near the hearth declare that the younger generation has no respect for lungs. The fire needs air, but not too much. People need light, but not at the cost of warmth. A medieval hall is a balance of discomforts, each one negotiated by custom, stone, wood, and long experience. No one can quite agree whether the smoke is worse in winter, when shutters stay closed, or in summer, when damp wood burns badly and flies become ambitious. A grey-bearded man insists winter smoke is honest smoke, the kind that keeps roof beams dry and drives insects away. A laundress replies that smoke has never washed a shirt in its life, and should therefore offer fewer opinions. The table accepts this as a strong argument. Above you, soot-black rafters disappear into gloom. Strips of dried herbs hang near the wall. A charm of rowan twigs is tied beside one shutter, perhaps to keep away witchcraft, perhaps to keep away draughts, perhaps because someone tied it there years ago and nobody wants to be the person who removes it. Medieval households are full of such objects, useful, half-useful, symbolic, forgotten, and impossible to question without causing trouble. The Lord's table stands on a raised dais at the far end, where better candles burn with steadier flames. Beeswax, cleaner and sweeter than tallow, lends the high end of the hall a faint honeyed smell. The important people sit beneath a hanging cloth embroidered with faded beasts. Their faces glow gold, then vanish into shadow, then glow again. Even there, the windows are small. Rank may grant softer bread, finer cups, and warmer cloaks, but it does not persuade stone walls to become foolish. A steward passes by carrying a ring of iron keys. They clink softly at his belt, a sound that seems to belong to every castle corridor after sunset. He checks shutters as he moves, pressing one peg tighter, testing another latch. This nightly habit matters. A loose shutter can let in wind. A broken fastening can turn a warm room cold before midnight, and cold is not a minor inconvenience here. Cold stiffens fingers, weakens the old, wakes children, spoils tempers, and makes every blanket seem thinner than the promises of a tax collector. You lean back slightly and feel heat from the hearth on your face while your shoulders remain cool. The hall is not evenly warmed. Medieval rooms rarely are. Near the fire, cheeks flush. Near the walls, breath can still mist. In the corners, winter crouches patiently. The tiny windows help keep that winter small, not absent, never absent, but held back, like a wolf beyond the firelight. The dog settles under the bench and places its chin on your boot. This appears to be final. Somewhere beyond the shutters, rain runs down the outer wall in silver threads. Inside, people talk more softly as bowls empty. A child falls asleep against a woman's side. A servant gathers scraps for the kitchen, carefully saving what can be softened tomorrow into another meal. Nothing is wasted. Bread becomes trencher. Trencher becomes food for the poor or animals. Bones become broth. Ashes become cleaning grit. And smoke becomes everyone's personal fragrance whether they requested it or not. You begin to smell like the hall yourself, wood smoke, wet wool, onions, ale, and the faint sweetness of beeswax. It is not unpleasant after a while. It is simply the scent of shelter, the scent of people who know the night outside is larger than they are. When the wind presses again at the shutters, the flames bend but do not falter. The narrow windows hold. The hall remains dim, smoky, warm enough, and deeply alive. You understand then that these small openings are not merely architectural choices. They shape the evening itself. They gather people inward. They make the hearth, the centre, the candle precious, the wall trustworthy, and the darkness outside something heard rather than entered. And as the monastery bell in the distance answers the castle chapel with a faint, rain-blurred note, you stay where you are, one boot claimed by the dog, one hand around a wooden cup, while the little windows keep the storm beyond the stone, and the great hall breathes around you like a drowsy beast. The hall grows quieter as the evening deepens, not silent, never silent. Medieval buildings are full of sounds that linger after conversation fades. Logs settle in the hearth. A bench creaks beneath shifting weight. Somewhere overhead, footsteps cross a timber gallery. Rain taps softly against shutters. The dog beneath your bench dreams of something important and kicks one paw against your boot. You remain near the fire while servants begin clearing the last of the supper trenchers. The smoke hangs thick beneath the rafters now, turning candlelight into hazy gold halos. It gives the room the appearance of a half-remembered dream, as though the castle itself is becoming sleepy. A steward eventually approaches your table. He carries the familiar ring of iron keys and wears the expression of a man who has spent 20 years discovering new ways that other people can create work for him. "Come along," he says. That is all. No explanation. No invitation. Merely confidence that people will follow. You do. The dog follows as well. The steward notices but wisely decides this battle has already been lost. Together you leave the hall and enter a network of passages lit by scattered candles. Their flames tremble in wall niches, casting shadows that sway like monks at prayer. The castle feels different at night. During daylight it is a fortress. After dark it becomes a collection of small islands of light floating in a sea of stone. Every candle matters. Every lantern matters. Every bit of illumination must be earned. You soon learn why. The steward leads you into a chamber where several servants are working round a table. A wooden frame rests in the centre. Within the frame sits a small panel of glass. Real glass. Even in the candlelight it catches reflections and throws them back with a faint green shimmer. You instinctively step closer. The servants react the way modern museum guards react when someone reaches toward an ancient artifact. Immediately, nervously, collectively, one woman actually gasps. You withdraw your hand. The steward nods approvingly. Good choice. Only then do you appreciate the value of what lies before you. Glass is rare. Glass is expensive. Glass is fragile. Glass is troublesome. And in much of the medieval world, it remains a luxury far beyond the reach of ordinary people. Today a broken window might mean a trip to the hardware store. Here it can mean weeks of waiting, significant expense, and a steward quietly losing his will to live. The panel itself is imperfect. Tiny bubbles float within it. The surface ripples slightly. Looking through it would distort the world beyond. Yet to castle folk this is a marvel. A servant carefully wipes moisture from its surface with a cloth. Another checks the wooden frame surrounding it. Their attention resembles that of jewelers inspecting gemstones. In a sense, that is exactly what they are doing. The steward explains that only a handful of rooms in the castle possess glazed windows. The chapel, a private chamber, perhaps the Lord's solar. A few places where status and comfort justify the expense. Most openings remain shuttered with wood. Some use oiled cloth stretched across frames. Others employ thin slices of horn scraped until light can pass through. You blink. Horn. The steward nods. Ox horn. Carefully prepared. Thin enough to glow. Strong enough to survive rough weather. Not clear. Not beautiful. But practical. Practical wins many arguments in the Middle Ages. You continue deeper into the keep. The steward shows you examples. One narrow opening is covered by an oiled linen panel. Moonlight filters through it as a pale blur. Another chamber uses horn panes fitted into a lattice of wood. The effect resembles cloudy amber. Light enters. Details do not. Privacy comes free of charge. You begin noticing how different each solution feels. Glass offers clarity. Horn offers durability. Shutters offer protection. Oiled cloth offers economy. Every window becomes a compromise. Every household chooses according to wealth, climate, and necessity. No one can quite agree when glass first became truly common among the wealthy. Some swear their grandfather saw grand halls glittering with it. Others insist those stories grow larger with every retelling. Like fish, or saints' miracles, or taxes owed by neighbouring villages. The steward eventually pauses beside a window recess overlooking the inner courtyard. This opening contains one of the precious glass panels. A candle burns nearby. The flame reflects in the wavering surface. Beyond the pane, rain still falls. The drops slide across the glass in crooked silver paths. You realize something important. The existence of glass does not immediately create large windows. The glass itself remains costly. The larger the opening, the more glass required. The more glass required, the more money vanishes. Money, like heat, is something medieval households prefer not to lose through unnecessary openings. The steward appears pleased by your growing understanding. He gestures toward the thick wall surrounding the pane. Imagine making it twice as wide. You do. The cost doubles. Perhaps more. Repairs become harder. Weakness increases. Heat escapes. The practical advantages begin shrinking rapidly. A narrow window starts looking sensible again. You pass through another chamber where two women spin wool beside a candle. The room feels intimate, sheltered, safe. The narrow opening allows only a little moonlight to enter. Most illumination comes from the flame itself. Outside, the world has vanished into darkness. Inside, the room feels complete, contained, almost womb-like. This effect is not accidental. Small windows create smaller worlds. They focus attention inward, toward the hearth, toward family, toward conversation, toward work. The medieval home is not designed to admire landscapes. It is designed to endure winters. One spinner mentions a local belief. Her grandmother always insisted that large openings invited wandering spirits during certain feast days. Another woman laughs, then quietly touches a charm hanging near the window frame. Just in case. That, too, feels very medieval. Mock the superstition. Respect it anyway. You continue onward. A narrow stair climbs into a small upper chamber. The air grows colder immediately. Here, little heat reaches from the lower levels. A single candle burns beside a chest. The window is tiny, barely more than a slit, yet the wind still finds ways to whisper around the frame. You pull your cloak tighter. Imagine this room with a larger opening. The chill would become unbearable. Every gust would strip away warmth. Every winter night would feel longer. Suddenly the tiny window seems less restrictive and more compassionate. Not generous, not comfortable, but survivable. Outside, the rain finally begins to ease. Clouds break apart. Moonlight emerges. Silver light touches the courtyard below. The narrow windows glow softly from within, golden slivers against dark stone. You notice how beautiful they appear, not despite their size. Because of it, each window resembles a tiny lantern, a small promise of shelter, a sign that people gather behind those walls, that fires burn, that bread bakes, that stories continue. The steward eventually dismisses you near a guest chamber prepared for travellers. Inside stands a simple bed stuffed with straw. A wool blanket rests folded upon it. The room contains one candle, one chest, one stool, one narrow window fitted with a wooden shutter. Nothing more, nothing less. The dog circles twice before lying beside the hearth. Apparently it has decided to stay. You sit on the edge of the bed and examine the shutter. Iron latch, oak planks. Simple construction, yet immensely important. Close it, and warmth remains. Open it, and the night enters. You unlatch it briefly. Cold air immediately slips inside. The difference is astonishing. The room changes within seconds. You close it again. The warmth returns slowly. Lesson learned. Outside, the moon watches over towers, walls, and sleeping roofs. Inside, the candle burns steadily. The tiny window keeps its vigil. And as you settle beneath rough wool blankets, listening to distant water dripping from stone and the faint breathing of your newly acquired canine companion, you begin to appreciate that medieval windows were never truly about seeing more of the world. They were about deciding how much of the world should be allowed in. You wake before dawn because the cold has become personal. It has crept through the room in silence, slipped beneath the door, gathered around the floor stones, and found the exact places where your blanket is thinnest. Medieval winter does not merely enter a chamber. It negotiates with every crack, every hinge, every tired peg in the shutter, and somehow wins enough territory to remind you that comfort is temporary and wool is doing its best. The candle is burned down to a small hard pool of wax. Beside the hearth, the dog sleeps curled into itself, nose tucked beneath tail, looking like a question mark made of fur. This seems wise. You consider copying the shape. The narrow window remains shuttered. Even so, a faint line of grey seeps through the edges, not bright enough to count as daylight, only enough to reveal the room's shapes, the stool, the chest, the rough plaster, your boots waiting beside the bed with mud stiffened along their seams. Beyond the oak shutter, the world is still dark. Somewhere outside, water drips from the roof in slow, patient beats. You sit up beneath the wool blanket and immediately regret your ambition. The room is not freezing exactly. The thick walls and tiny window have kept out the worst of the night, but warmth here is never abundant. It is rationed by architecture, firewood, fabric, and luck. A larger window would have stolen what little comfort remained. It would have let the wind comb the room from wall to wall, lifted the rushes, rattled the candle flame, and turned the bed into an educational exhibit on suffering. You understand this with your bones before your mind has fully joined the morning. The latch on the shutter trembles faintly as wind moves outside. You rise, pull your cloak around your shoulders, and touch the wood. It is cold, but not wet. Good oak, thick enough to resist weather. The iron latch holds firm. Someone has wedged wool scraps into one corner where a draught once found its way in. It looks untidy, but it works. Medieval home improvement often appears as though a tired person solved a problem with whatever was nearest, and honestly, many empires have achieved less. You open the shutter only a finger's width. Winter breathes in at once. The air touches your face like water from a deep well. Outside, the courtyard lies pale beneath frost. Roof lines sharpen in the thin light. A stable boy crosses the yard carrying a bucket, shoulders hunched, steam rising from his mouth. Above the chapel, the first bell begins to move. One slow note, then another. The sound spreads through the castle and into the waking fields beyond, marking time for people who do not own clocks and do not need to. Bells tell them when to pray, when to work, when to eat, when to measure the day's obedience. In a monastery, bells shape the soul. In a castle, they shape the household. In a bedchamber at dawn, they mostly remind you that lying down forever is not considered productive. You close the shutter quickly. The room softens again, not warm, but less cruel. Soon a servant knocks and enters with a small bundle of fresh rushes and a jug of water that looks far too cold to have friendly intentions. She tells you that breakfast will be taken below, and that the steward expects travellers to depart after the morning meal unless roads have flooded. Her tone suggests that flooded roads are unfortunate but not impossible to arrange. She kneels to stir the hearth ash, searching for any living ember. There is one, deep under grey powder, a tiny orange eye. She feeds it straw, then splinters, then a small piece of wood. Her hands move with practiced economy. Fire is not casual here. Fire is work, memory, and care. Letting it die completely means starting again with flint, steel, tinder, patience, and language unsuitable for devotional manuscripts. Some swear that banking embers under ash before sleep keeps not only heat but household luck alive until morning. Others say if the first flame catches cleanly, the day will go well. The servant says nothing of this, but when the straw flares bright on the first try, she touches 2 fingers lightly to her brow before standing. You notice. She pretends you do not. This is another quiet habit of the age, half prayer, half superstition, wholly practical. The small fire begins to breathe. A faint warmth gathers near the hearth. You dress slowly, pulling on chilled boots, fastening your cloak, and discovering that damp wool from yesterday has become the emotional centre of your morning. The dog wakes, stretches extravagantly, and looks at you as if disappointed that you're not already producing breakfast. You follow it down through the passage. The castle is stirring. Servants carry armfuls of wood. A laundress passes with linen bundled against her hip. Somewhere near the kitchens, someone chops onions with the steady rhythm of a small battle. The narrow windows along the corridor show thin strips of dawn, each one deep within stone, each one admitting only a measured blade of light. Frost has silvered the edges of some shutters from the outside, but indoors the walls hold steady. Downstairs, the morning meal is plain coarse bread, ale, a little cheese, and leftover pottage warmed until it regains courage. Men eat quickly before work. Women speak over baskets and keys. The steward counts something on a wax tablet. Perhaps supplies, perhaps sins, perhaps both. Near the doorway, 2 boys argue about whether frost on the threshold means a clear day or a fox passing in the night. No one can quite agree whether the fox is required to be seen for the omen to count. The hall's small windows admit dim morning light now. You see how little reaches the floor. Most of the room remains dependent on fire and candle, yet no one complains. This is what morning looks like indoors: a slow, grey arrival, a gradual loosening of shadow. The world does not burst in through wide glass, it seeps through narrow stone like water through cloth. After breakfast, you're shown briefly into a manor chamber attached to the inner range, a more domestic room used by household officers and guests of middling importance. It has a bed with curtains, a chest for linens, pegs for cloaks, and 2 small windows fitted with shutters. One faces the yard, one faces the fields. Both are narrow. You stand between them and feel how the room holds warmth better than the hall. The ceiling is lower, the walls are thick, the openings are restrained. A fur-lined cloak hangs near the bed, and folded wool blankets rest in a chest with lavender tucked among them to discourage moths. Whether the lavender truly discourages moths or merely makes their dining experience more fragrant is difficult to say, but the custom persists. You run your fingers over the shutter latch. A room like this is not bright, but it is defensible against cold. It gives sleep a chance. It keeps rain from bedding, wind from bones, and frost from settling inside the cup beside the bed. In the long arithmetic of medieval life, that matters more than seeing the sunrise from a generous window. Outside, the morning finally strengthens. The bell falls silent. The broken clouds pale above the walls. You prepare to leave the chamber, carrying with you the memory of the night's narrow shelter. Cold stone, rough wool, a dying candle, a shutter that held, and the strange comfort of a window small enough to keep the winter mostly outside. After the morning meal, you follow the steward into the yard, where frost still clings in pale scraps along the edges of barrels, cart wheels, and roof tiles. The dog trots beside you with the steady confidence of a creature who's never paid rent yet expects full household privileges. Above, the castle walls rise into a cold blue morning, their tiny windows dark and watchful, as if the whole place has slept with one eye open. Near the base of the keep, a mason is already at work. He stands beside a stack of cut stones, wrapped in a heavy wool cloak dusted white with lime. His hands are broad, cracked, and pale with powdered mortar. A wooden mallet hangs from his belt, along with chisels, a measuring cord, and a little iron square that he handles with the tenderness other men reserve for relics. His apprentice, a narrow boy with red ears and an expression of permanent worry, mixes mortar in a trough with sand, lime, water, and the resigned misery of youth. The mason looks up as you approach. "Come to admire the wall?" he asks. You glance at the massive keep. It seems difficult not to. This pleases him. Masons, you discover, enjoy respect almost as much as they enjoy explaining why everyone else is wrong about walls. He leads you to a section where repairs are being made around a narrow window. From outside, the opening is little more than a slit. From within, you remember, such windows widen into deep recesses, but here the exterior face remains tight and strong. The mason taps the stone beside it. "Too wide," he says, and the wall forgets what it is. You stand close and see what he means. A castle wall is not simply a pile of stones. It is weight, pressure, balance, memory. Each block leans on the next. Each course settles into the one beneath. The wall pushes downward, outward, inward, always shifting in tiny ways too slow for the eye but never absent, cut too much away for a window, and the stone above must be persuaded not to fall. Arches help, lintels help, care helps most of all. Still, the larger the opening, the greater the risk, the labour, and the expense. The mason points to the top of the window, where stones curve slightly into a small arch. That carries the burden around the gap. He traces the line with one thick finger. You imagine the weight of the tower pressing down from above chambers, roof, beams, stored grain, sleeping men, weapons, pigeons, dust, and generations of bad weather. All of it must pass around the opening and continue downward safely. The tiny window is not only safer from arrows and cold, it is safer for the building itself. Some swear old masons could hear weakness inside a wall by tapping it with a hammer. Others say they judged by dust, by cracks, by the way rain dried after a storm. No one can quite agree whether the best masons learned from geometry, saints, or simply from watching careless buildings collapse. The mason before you gives the wall another tap and listens with grave attention. So perhaps all three have their place. He shows you the thickness of the keep by leading you through a side passage into the interior. The same window you saw outside now opens inward through a deep splayed reveal. The stone widens toward the room, allowing more light to spread while keeping the outer gap narrow. This is clever. From outside, strength remains. From inside, the little daylight is coaxed wider, stretched across the chamber like butter scraped carefully over coarse bread. Light is welcome, the mason says, but not at any price. That sentence seems to contain half the Middle Ages. In the chamber, a workman scrapes old mortar from a joint. A basket of broken stone rests nearby for reuse. Nothing is wasted here either. Not bread, not bones, not ash, not stone. Even damaged blocks may be turned, trimmed, fitted somewhere humbler. The apprentice carries a fresh pail and nearly drops it when the dog sniffs his ankle. The mason sighs, a sound suggesting this apprentice may one day become skilled if he survives buckets. You run your hand along the window's inner slope. The stone is cold, slightly damp, and faintly gritty beneath your palm. Here the shape matters. The sides angle outward into the room, creating a funnel for light. It is not generous, but it is thoughtful. Medieval builders may not give you brightness, exactly, but they do try to make darkness behave. The mason explains that homes of timber and wattle follow different rules, yet even their openings must be modest. Cut too much from a wall and it weakens. A roof is heavy, rain is persistent, wind is rude. A building must brace itself against all three. In poorer homes, where walls are made from timber frames filled with woven sticks and daubed clay, large windows mean more labour, more repair, more cold, and more places for weather to creep in like a tax collector with wet boots. You step back outside. The morning has brightened. Men haul stones with ropes and wooden rollers. The sound of work fills the yard. Mallet strikes, cart creaks, a donkey objecting to existence, the wet scrape of mortar. A woman brings hot ale in a covered jug for the workmen, spiced faintly with something sharp. One man claims it strengthens the blood. Another says it mostly strengthens his willingness to continue. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval remedies cure the body or simply negotiate with morale. The mason takes you to the foot of a tower and points upward. People want height, he says, lords especially. They look at hills and towers and begin thinking foolish thoughts. You follow his gaze. The tower rises sternly above you, its windows narrow as knife marks. The mason continues, explaining that the taller a structure climbs, the more carefully its openings must be placed. Walls carry weight downward, corners brace against movement, openings interrupt strength. A small window can be managed. A great broad one demands skill, money, and sometimes prayers offered in advance. He says this dryly, but not irreverently. In this world, craftsmanship and prayer stand close together. Before new work begins, some masons mark stones with crosses, some set charms in foundations, some place coins, bones, or written blessings where no one will see them again. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such things strengthen the wall, please the saints, or merely comfort the men who must stand beneath their own work. At last the mason hands you a small offcut of stone. It is heavier than it looks. Walls are patient, he says, windows are interruptions. You hold the stone in your palm and look again at the narrow openings scattered across the keep. You no longer see only darkness, discomfort, or lack. You see decisions, calculations, generations of hands measuring how much light a wall can spare without forgetting its duty. By noon, the frost has melted from the yard. Water drips from the eaves. The dog lies in a square of thin sunlight near the stones, accepting warmth as its ancestral right. The mason returns to his work, tapping, listening, fitting, correcting. Above him, the tiny windows remain set deep in the castle walls, not timid, not accidental, but carefully chosen small enough for strength, wide enough for a little light, and patient enough to endure whatever the next winter, lord, storm, or ambitious apprentice may bring. By the time the noon light begins to thin behind a veil of cloud, you climb again toward the battlements, leaving the masons steady tapping behind you in the yard. The sound follows for a while, soft and regular, like a second bell made of stone. Your small offcut rests heavy in your pouch, knocking gently against your hip with each step, a reminder that walls are patient and windows are interruptions. The dog attempts the stairs with you, pauses halfway, considers the matter, and decides that military architecture is beneath its dignity. You continue without it. The stair curls upward inside the tower, narrow and steep, turning always in the same tight direction. Your hand brushes cold stone. Your boots find worn dips in the steps made by men who climbed here before you guards. Servants, messengers, perhaps frightened boys sent to watch the road in weather no sensible bird would endure. Small slits in the wall admit blades of pale light. Through each, you glimpse pieces of the world: a field, a roof, a wet strip of road, the brown thread of the river. At the top, the wind greets you with unnecessary enthusiasm. It tugs your cloak, slips under your collar, and proves that winter has not forgiven the castle for existing. You step onto the wall walk between crenellations, those raised teeth of stone that make the battlement look ready to bite the sky. A guard stands there with a spear, his hood pulled low, his nose red from cold. He nods as if you were expected, or at least not worth throwing down the stairs. From here, the reason for tiny windows sharpens into something plain and physical. The land spreads below muddy road, bare orchards, grazing fields, a line of forest dark beyond the village roofs. Beautiful, yes, in a stern and hungry way. But every path is also an approach. Every hedge may hide a man. Every wagon may bring grain, news, plague, taxes, relatives, or trouble, and of these, trouble often travels lightest. The guard points down toward the gatehouse. See the slits. You see them. Narrow openings on either side of the gate, cut at angles through the stone. Good for bowmen, he says, hard for others. You imagine standing outside with rain in your eyes, trying to aim at a defender hidden behind such a slit. From within, the archer sees enough. From without, the attacker sees almost nothing. The window becomes not an invitation, but a trap of vision generous to the person inside, miserly to anyone below. A larger window would change that completely. It would offer a target. It would invite a ladder. It would give enemy hands a place to grip and enemy eyes a place to study the room beyond. In peaceful weather, broad openings seem lovely. In a siege, they become regrettable suggestions. The guard walks with you along the wall. He shows you how some slits are vertical, suited for bows, while others widen slightly inside so the defender can angle a shot. Some are shaped like crosses, allowing more movement. Some newer ones are rounder near the base, meant for hand cannons, though the guard speaks of such weapons with the suspicion usually reserved for strange food and ambitious cousins. No one can quite agree whether the first thunder of gunpowder frightened horses more than men. Some swear old war horses stood firm while knights crossed themselves and pretended not to flinch. Others claim everyone flinched, including the saints painted on chapel walls. The guard says only fools trust a weapon that makes more smoke than sense, then admits, after a pause, that smoke or not, it can crack a gate. Even defensive windows must change when the world changes, but they remain small. Small is safer. Small is cheaper. Small is harder to climb through. Small keeps the wall strong. You pause beside a crenel and look down into the ditch. It is not filled with shining water like the tales sometimes promise. Instead, it contains mud, reeds, old rain, and the sort of smell that encourages reflection from a distance. A ladder set there would wobble. Men climbing under arrows would have a poor afternoon. The castle's windows, slits, walls, ditch, gate, and towers all work together. None is grand alone. Together, they whisper the same message, go somewhere easier. The guard seems proud of this. He should be. A fortress is an argument made in stone. As you continue, he tells you of a raid years ago, though his version is gentle enough for the hour. Men came at dawn, not a great army, just a hungry band hoping to seize supplies. They found shutters barred, gate closed, windows too narrow for entry, and watchmen awake. A few arrows were loosed, a few curses exchanged. The raiders eventually left with one stolen chicken from a cottage outside the wall, which the guard considers both a crime and a poor strategic outcome. Some swear the chicken returned 3 days later. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether this proves the bird's loyalty, the raider's incompetence, or the village's desperate need for better stories. You smile into your cloak. The wind softens for a moment. Below, life continues in the bailey with reassuring ordinary stubbornness. A servant carries folded linen, a smith hammers near the stables. The mason's apprentice drops something again. Smoke rises from the kitchen roof. The narrow windows of the keep glow faintly where candles burn inside, each one protected by height, shutters, and thick stone. You begin to understand that defense is not only battle. It is the everyday protection of sleep, grain, tools, children, animals, winter stores, and the fragile peace of people who have worked too hard to lose everything to one bad night. A large window may delight a peaceful age. A small window reassures an uncertain one. The guard leads you into a small watch chamber built into the wall. It is barely furnished: a bench, a brazier, a peg for cloaks, a shelf with a horn cup, and a narrow viewing slit overlooking the road. Dried rushes lie on the floor, though they do little against the cold. A charm made of iron nails and red thread hangs above the doorway. The guard says a former watchman tied it there after dreaming of ladders. He laughs when he says it. He does not remove it. Inside the chamber, the wind falls quiet. The slit admits a narrow bar of daylight, enough to see the road without surrendering warmth. The brazier glows dull red. You warm your hands above it and feel how small spaces preserve heat better than grand ones. Here, architecture becomes almost intimate. The narrow window gives the watchman purpose without offering the weather too much authority. For a while, you both say nothing. A crow crosses the sky. A cart creaks along the distant road. The bell from the chapel marks the hour, its voice thinner up here, snatched by the wind. You think back to the hall, the shuttered chamber, the glass panel, the mason's careful arch. Every place has taught the same lesson differently. Tiny windows are not one answer, but many answers stacked together: warmth, cost, strength, privacy, belief, and defense. Here on the battlements, defense speaks loudest. At last, the guard straightens. Best come down before the weather remembers us. A fair concern. You descend the tower stair slowly, knees aware of every uneven step. At the bottom, the dog waits with an expression of mild accusation, as though you have wasted valuable time among battlements when crumbs might exist elsewhere. You follow it back toward the inner yard, carrying the wind in your cloak and the image of those narrow slits in your mind, little eyes of stone, watching roads, resisting ladders, and keeping bad neighbours at a respectful distance. You leave the shadow of the castle shortly after midday. Not forever, merely for a while. The steward has business in the nearby village, and since travellers are useful whenever errands exist, you find yourself accompanying a small group through the gate. The dog comes too, despite receiving no official appointment. It trots ahead as though inspecting lands that legally belong to it. Behind you, the castle rises above the hill, its narrow windows dark against the pale afternoon sky. From this distance they seem even smaller, tiny marks cut into a vast body of stone. Yet now, after days among walls, shutters, hearths, and watchmen, you see them differently. They no longer look mean. They look practical. The road descends toward a cluster of cottages gathered around a muddy lane. Smoke curls from thatched roofs. Geese wander with the confidence of minor nobility. A woman hangs laundry despite clouds that clearly have other plans. Children chase each other between puddles. Life unfolds here at a smaller scale than within the castle, yet the same concerns remain. Warmth, safety, storage, survival. The village may lack towers and battlements, but winter visits everyone equally. You pass the first cottage and immediately notice its windows. Tiny, not castle slits, certainly, but small. A little opening covered by wooden shutters. Another fitted with stretched oiled cloth. A third protected by a lattice of wood. No broad panes of sparkling glass. No generous flood of sunlight. Just careful openings placed where they are most useful. The steward notices your attention. They build according to sense. That seems to be the medieval answer to nearly every question. Why this roof? Why this wall? Why this window? Sense. You stop beside a cottage where an elderly woman sits spinning wool near the doorway. The interior lies visible behind her. Dark, warm, smoky. A fire burns in the centre. Bundles of herbs hang from roof beams. The entire dwelling could fit inside one corner of the castle's great hall. Yet it feels alive, occupied, protected. The old woman waves you closer. The dog immediately abandons you and presents itself for admiration. Traitor. The woman scratches behind its ears. You've brought a good dog. You are fairly certain the dog brought you. Inside the cottage, the importance of small windows becomes impossible to ignore. The room contains precious little heat to spare. The fire provides warmth. The people provide warmth. Even the animals contribute. A pair of chickens occupy one corner. A goat occupies another. The goat appears convinced it owns the property. The small window admits a modest amount of daylight. Nothing more. Any larger opening would allow winter to steal warmth that cannot easily be replaced. Firewood requires labour. Time requires labour. Everything requires labour. Heat is expensive. Cold is free. Cold arrives uninvited and stays as long as it pleases. No one can quite agree whether goats understand this economic arrangement, though many seem determined to benefit from it. You sit for a while beside the fire. The old woman spins steadily. Her spindle turns. Wool twists into thread. Outside, clouds drift across the sky. Inside, the tiny window glows softly. She tells you that her father once covered openings during severe winters with extra cloth and wool. Others packed moss into cracks. Some used leather. Anything that slowed the wind. Because wind is the true enemy. More than snow. More than frost. Wind reaches everywhere. The cottage walls themselves reveal another reason for modest windows. Unlike castle stone, these walls are made from timber framing filled with wattle and daub. Wooden beams support woven branches coated with clay, straw, and mud. Strong enough. Warm enough. Affordable enough. But not ideal for large openings. Every window interrupts the structure. Every interruption demands extra support. The builder must balance light against strength. The same lesson returns once again. Different building. Same reality. Eventually you continue through the village. Near the well, women draw water while discussing local news. A pig wanders through the conversation without contributing meaningfully. Children run past carrying sticks that are apparently swords. Every generation begins military planning early. You notice how nearly every cottage shares similar proportions. Small windows, low ceilings, compact rooms, buildings designed to hold warmth close. Not because people dislike sunshine, not because they fear beauty, because surviving winter matters more. One cottage displays bundles of garlic hanging near a window frame. Another has dried herbs tied above the shutter. A third bears a small wooden charm carved into the shape of a cross. Some swear certain herbs protect against sickness entering through open windows. Others insist draughts carry fevers. A few claim moonlight falling across a sleeping face invites strange dreams. Even now it is hard to separate practical observation from superstition. After all, as cold air genuinely can make a room uncomfortable, sickness genuinely spreads. People seek explanations. Sometimes they find science. Sometimes they find folklore. Often they keep both. You reach the village storehouse near the edge of the fields. The structure contains grain collected for winter. Its windows are even smaller. Storage buildings have different priorities. Grain dislikes moisture. Mice appreciate opportunity. Thieves appreciate opportunity even more. Tiny openings help discourage all three. The steward inspects locks while explaining that a spoiled harvest can threaten an entire community. Stored food represents security. Security requires protection. Protection often means fewer windows. The pattern has become familiar. Everywhere you look, the medieval world trades openness for resilience. Not completely, not absolutely, but consistently. You leave the storehouse and walk toward the fields. Bare earth stretches beneath a pale sky. Winter wheat pushes through in neat rows. Beyond lies woodland dark with leafless branches. A shepherd guides sheep across a distant slope. The village appears small from here. Smoke rises from dozens of chimneys. The tiny windows are barely visible. Yet you know they are there, holding warmth, holding families, holding little circles of life against the vast countryside. You stop beside a cottage where sunlight strikes one small window directly. The oiled cloth covering glows golden, not transparent, not clear, but beautiful in its own way. The light resembles amber, soft, gentle, enough. That word keeps returning. Enough light, enough warmth, enough safety. Medieval architecture often aims for enough rather than abundance. Abundance is expensive. Enough is achievable. A man repairing a fence nearby offers his opinion. Big windows are for churches and rich people. He pauses. Mostly churches. There is truth in that. Great religious buildings sometimes pursue light differently. But ordinary homes answer to ordinary needs. And ordinary needs usually involve keeping children warm and roofs attached. The afternoon drifts onward. Cloud shadows cross the fields. The dog discovers something fascinating near a hedge and refuses to explain. A bell sounds faintly from the castle above. You glance back. The fortress still dominates the landscape, its tiny windows visible once more. Yet now they seem less unusual. The cottages below share the same philosophy. Different materials, different scales, different lives, but similar priorities. As you begin walking back toward the hill, boots crunching softly over frosted ground, you realize that medieval homes and castles are connected by more than roads and loyalties. Both are shelters against uncertainty. Both guard precious warmth. Both ration light carefully. And whether built of towering stone or humble timber, they trust small windows to help them endure another winter night. By late afternoon, you enter the town market beyond the village lane, where the road widens into a square of mud, cobbles, straw, and determined bargaining. Stalls stand beneath patched awnings. Merchants shout over baskets of onions, smoked fish, wool cloth, iron nails, clay pots, and little pilgrim badges stamped with saints who appear very patient about being sold beside turnips. The dog trots between boots with professional confidence, probably looking for theology and sausage form. The townhouses lean close around the square. Their upper stories jut slightly over the street, timber frames dark with rain, plaster panels patched and smoke-stained. Here too the windows are small, though more varied than in the village. Some have shutters folded outward like tired wings. Some are covered with horn panes or oiled cloth. A few wealthier shops display tiny pieces of glass set in lead, each uneven pane catching the grey light like a trapped drop of water. You stand beneath an awning while rain begins again, soft at first, then steadier. A cloth merchant pulls his shutters half closed, not shutting out customers entirely, only reminding the weather that it has no purchasing power. Inside his shop, bolts of wool rest on shelves in shadow. A broad window would show them better, perhaps, but it would also invite damp, theft, fading, and fingers belonging to people who believe touching is not the same as buying. The merchant catches your glance. Light is good, he says, but so is keeping what is mine. A simple creed? Very popular. Market towns live by controlled openings. A shop window must reveal enough to tempt buyers, but not enough to make stealing easy. It must admit light, but not ruin goods. It must invite trade, but preserve privacy upstairs, where families sleep, count coins, mend clothing, and pretend not to hear their neighbours arguing through thin walls. No one can quite agree whether market gossip travels faster through open windows or under closed doors. A baker nearby insists shutters are useless against gossip because gossip enters through keyholes, chimney smoke, and cousins. This seems difficult to disprove. You wander slowly past the stalls. A potter packs unsold cups into straw. A fishwife covers her salted eels. A man selling iron hinges demonstrates one with such seriousness that you briefly feel hinges may be the foundation of civilization. Perhaps they are. Without hinges, shutters fail. Without shutters, warmth escapes. Without warmth, everyone becomes unpleasant before supper. At one corner of the square stands the toll booth, a narrow building with one small serving opening, barred from within. There, a clerk records fees on a wax tablet while merchants approach with the weary faces of people about to be separated from money by official procedure. The booth's tiny window allows coins and complaints to pass, but not much else. It protects the clerk, the records, and the collected silver from rain, thieves, and excessive intimacy with angry traders. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval bureaucracy prefers small windows for security or because clerks enjoy appearing from darkness like judgmental owls. The steward conducts his business there, speaking quietly with the toll-keeper while you wait beneath the eaves. You watch townspeople close shutters as daylight fades. The change is gradual but striking. One by one, houses turn inward. The market square that seemed open and noisy an hour ago begins shrinking into smaller pockets of warmth. A candle appears behind horn panes. A fire glows through oiled cloth. A woman leans out briefly to call a child home, then bars the shutter after him. Privacy matters here. In crowded towns, a large window invites not only weather and thieves but eyes. Neighbours observe too much already. A small window lets a household choose what it reveals. It protects reputation, and reputation in a medieval town can be as valuable as coin. People know who waters ale, who cheats waits, who speaks too often with whom, and who bought too much saffron for someone claiming poverty. Wide windows would only worsen the sport. You pass a goldsmith's shop with iron bars across its small opening. The interior gleams faintly. Tiny scales sit on a table. A locked chest rests behind the counter. The goldsmith himself watches the square through the bars with the calm suspicion of a man whose profession requires both delicacy and distrust. His window is small for reasons the dullest thief could understand. The smaller the gap, the safer the goods. The bars are not decoration, they are an opinion. Nearby, a spice seller unwraps little packets of pepper, cloves, and cinnamon. Their scent cuts through the market's damp wool, mud, fish, and livestock with astonishing brightness. Such goods are precious. The shop behind him has almost no window at all, only a shuttered hatch. He says spices must be kept dry and guarded. He also says cloves strengthen the stomach, cinnamon warms the blood, and pepper drives away sluggish humours. Some swear these remedies work beautifully. Others suspect anything expensive is believed useful, partly because no one wishes to admit they paid dearly for tree bark. Rain taps on canvas. The square empties further. A bell rings from the town church, calling the hour. People cross themselves, finish bargains, gather baskets, and hurry toward doorways. The dog shakes itself beside you, distributing rainwater with broad charity. You duck into a smoky alehouse at the steward's suggestion. Inside, the ceiling is low, the tables rough, and the windows very small. A fire burns against one wall. Benches crowd close. The air smells of ale, damp cloaks, garlic, and wood smoke. Rushes cover the floor, though under them lies the mysterious history of many evenings. A shutter near the door has been opened slightly for air, but a woman quickly closes it when the wind shifts and smoke rolls back into the room. Ventilation, you are learning, is a delicate medieval argument in which everyone loses politely. You sit with a cup of ale and listen. Merchants discuss tolls. A carter complains about wheel ruts. A pilgrim shows a badge from a distant shrine, tin shining against his cloak. He claims the saint protected him from fever, bad roads, and one innkeeper's stew. No one challenges the first two miracles. Outside the alehouse, the town darkens behind shuttered windows. Inside, voices settle into low warmth. The tiny openings hold the weather back, guard the goods stacked in corners, protect reputations from wandering eyes, and make the room feel like a small wooden ship afloat on a rainy evening. You realize that market windows are neither purely defensive like castle slits, nor purely domestic like cottage shutters. They belong to trade. They manage exchange. They allow a little seeing, a little selling, a little light, while resisting the many costs of openness. When the steward finally rises to leave, night has fully entered the square. The stalls are covered. The toll booth is barred. The goldsmith's window is dark. Only thin lines of candlelight slip through cracks in shutters above the shops. Each one marks a room where someone counts coins, folds cloth, eats pottage, scolds a child, warms hands, or whispers news that tomorrow will become market gossip whether windows approve or not. You pull your cloak close and step back into the rain. The castle waits on the hill, its own small windows glowing faintly through mist. Between town and fortress, cottage and keep, shop and gatehouse, the lesson continues to follow you as faithfully as the dog in this world. Every opening is a choice, and small windows let people decide carefully how much light, weather, danger, and other people they can afford to let in. You leave the market town by the north road, where the rain thins into mist and the evening smells of wet timber, horse dung, and distant wood smoke. The steward returns toward the castle with his business complete, but you are sent onward with a small packet for the abbey guestmaster, sealed in wax and wrapped carefully against damp. The dog comes too, of course, because apparently all roads are improved by a muddy companion with no respect for property boundaries. The abbey lies beyond a low rise, half hidden among bare trees. You hear it before you see it. A bell rings through the mist, slower and deeper than the town church bell, carrying across the fields with a calm that seems to settle even the rain. The sound draws you forward along a track lined with hedges, past a roadside shrine where a little wooden saint watches travellers from beneath a roof of mossy shingles. Someone has left a crust of bread there, and someone else has taken it. Perhaps a pilgrim, perhaps a crow, perhaps the saint after a long afternoon. No one can quite agree whether saints prefer candles, coins, or practical offerings like food. The dog votes strongly for food. The abbey gate stands open beneath a stone arch. A lay brother in a dark wool cloak receives the packet without surprise, as though travellers emerge from mist every evening carrying damp messages and suspicious dogs. He leads you through the outer court, where barns, workshops, stables and storehouses gather around the main church and cloister. Unlike the castle, the abbey does not feel ready to bite. It feels enclosed for another reason. Not fear exactly, discipline. Here, too, the windows are narrow. Some are simple slits in stone walls. Some are small arched openings filled with horn or glass. In the church, higher windows admit pale light, but even they are not broad by later standards. The abbey rations brightness differently from the castle, not only for warmth or defence, though both still matter. Here, limited light shapes attention. It turns eyes inward. It makes candle flames seem holy, ink strokes precious, and silence almost visible. The lay brother takes you first to the guest house. The room is plain benches, a hearth, straw pallets, a small table, and shutters closed against the damp. Rushes lie fresh on the floor, mixed with mint and perhaps rue. A beeswax candle burns near a niche holding a chipped little image of the Virgin. The air smells cleaner than the alehouse, though still strongly of wet wool, smoke, and humanity trying its best. A bowl of warm pottage is set before you. There is coarse bread too, and a small piece of cheese. Abbey hospitality may be humble, but after the road, it feels almost royal. The dog receives nothing officially, then somehow receives everything unofficially. After you eat, the lay brother leads you toward the cloister. The covered walk surrounds a square garden, dark now beneath mist and bare branches. Rain ticks softly from the roof edge into the grass. Along the inner wall, small arched openings face the garden, each one shaped to allow a narrow view without surrendering the sheltered hush of the walkway. Beyond them, the abbey church rises, its windows glowing with candlelight from within. A monk passes carrying a lantern. Another follows with a bundle of parchment. Their sandals whisper on stone. You enter the scriptorium, and there the abbey's measured glow reveals itself fully. The room is not bright. It is carefully lit. Small windows stand along one wall, set deep in stone, angled to pull in what remains of the day. Candles and lamps supplement the failing light, placed near desks where monks bend over manuscripts. Their fingers are stained with ink, their knives scrape parchment smooth, their quills move with tiny, patient scratches that sound like mice holding counsel. One scribe glances up, blinking as if returning from a far country. His desk holds a page bordered with red and blue decoration, and a gold initial that catches the candle flame. The gold seems brighter because the room is dim. In a sun-filled chamber, it might merely shine. Here, it glimmers like treasure found underground. The guest master, a kindly monk with tired eyes, explains that too much direct light can be troublesome. It fades colours, it dries parchment unevenly, it glares on polished surfaces, it distracts the eye. A small window, placed well, gives gentle light, especially from the north, where the sun is less harsh. Candles provide the rest, though candles cost money, and monks, despite appearances, cannot pray wax into existence. Some swear a well-cut quill writes better if trimmed after certain prayers. Others say ink darkens more truly when mixed on a dry day. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such habits belong to craft, faith, or long experience wearing a hood indoors. You watch a monk sharpen his quill with a small knife. He does it slowly. Precisely. Then he dips it into ink made from oak galls and iron salts, dark as a moonless pond. He writes a line, pauses, breathes, writes again. The narrow window beside him admits only enough grey light to steady his hand. The rest comes from the candle, whose flame leans whenever the door opens. Here, tiny windows help preserve a particular kind of quiet. The outside world remains softened. Rain is heard but not felt. Wind presses but does not rule. The garden is visible only in fragments wet grass, dark branch, stone path, a small covered well. The limited view becomes almost meditative. You do not gaze outward and drift away. You stay with the page, the flame, the breath, the bell. Another bell rings. The monks rise almost together. No one rushes. The movement is smooth from habit, like water following an old channel. They leave their desks, cover their work, and proceed toward the church for the next office. You follow at a respectful distance, the dog wisely remaining near the guest house, perhaps sensing that monastic patience has limits. Inside the church, the air is cold but still. Narrow windows sit high in the stone, dark beyond their small panes. Candles burn before saints' relics, some trusted, some quietly debated. A silver reliquary rests near the altar, said to contain a bone of a holy bishop. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the bishop ever visited this region, but everyone agrees the reliquary is polished beautifully. The chanting begins. Low voices rise and settle in waves. The small windows make the church feel less like a hall and more like a vessel. The darkness gathers high above. Candlelight trembles against pillars. The monk's song moves through the stone as gently as breath inside a sleeping body. You stand near the back and feel the day slow around you. Castle windows watch for enemies. Cottage windows kept warmth. Market windows guarded goods and gossip. Abbey windows do all these things, but they also teach restraint. They remind the monks that not every light should flood in freely. Some light must be softened, shaped, and received with care. After prayers, you return to the guest house. The rain has stopped. Mist lies low in the cloister garden. A lay brother checks the shutters before sleep, fastening each peg carefully. The guest master offers a wool blanket and points toward a pallet near the hearth. It is not luxurious. It is dry. Tonight, dry as a form of wealth. You lie down while the abbey settles into darkness. Somewhere nearby, a monk coughs. A candle gutters. The dog sighs from the doorway, having successfully infiltrated religious hospitality. Through a tiny crack in the shutter, you see one narrow thread of moonlight resting on the floor. It does not brighten the room. It simply reminds you that the world continues outside wet grass, silent fields, Castle Hill, Market Square, village smoke, and all the little windows holding their separate glows against the night. Morning finds you on the pilgrim road beneath a sky the colour of pewter, with the abbey bell fading behind you and wet fields opening ahead. The guest master has sent you onward after a breakfast of bread, ale, and a spoonful of honey so small it feels more symbolic than nourishing. Still, it sweetens the mouth, and in this world that counts as a blessing, the dog trots beside you, refreshed by monastic shelter and entirely unmoved by vows of simplicity. The road is little more than packed earth stitched with stones and puddles. Bare hedges lean over it. Water drips from black branches. Your cloak grows heavy with damp. Every few miles, a shrine or wayside cross appears, softened by moss, ribbons, and old prayers. A pilgrim ahead of you wears badges on his hat a shell, a little saint, a bent token from some far chapel where miracles are said to occur with more enthusiasm than consistency. No one can quite agree whether pilgrim badges protect the traveller or merely prove he has survived the inns. By midday, the rain begins again. Not a dramatic storm at first, only a fine needling mist that slips through wool and fine skin. Then wind rises across the open fields. The mist thickens into rain, slanting hard from the west. You pull your hood low, but the road offers no mercy. Mud grips your boots. Your fingers stiffen. Even the dog looks offended, which is impressive from an animal that willingly investigates ditches. At last, an inn appears near a bend in the road, crouched beneath a thatched roof dark with wet. Smoke seeps from a hole in the roof and from gaps under the eaves. The building has small shuttered windows, low walls, and a yard crowded with carts, hens, and one miserable mule considering philosophy. Inside, the air is close, smoky, and glorious. The room smells of damp cloaks, boiled onions, sour ale, rushes, and firewood. Traveller sits shoulder to shoulder near the hearth. A woman ladles pottage into bowls. A hostler hangs wet tack beside the door. The shutters are barred tight, except for one small gap near the roof line where smoke escapes when it feels cooperative. You understand immediately why roadside inns fear drafts. A draft is not just cold air. It is stolen warmth. It is smoke driven back into eyes. It is damp bedding. It is coughing guests. It is complaints, and complaints are a form of weather no innkeeper enjoys. Some swear a sudden draught across the hearth means a spirit has entered. Others say it means the shutter peg is loose and someone ought to fix it before supper. The innkeeper clearly belongs to the second school, though she mutters a blessing while tightening the peg, just in case. You find a place on a bench beside the pilgrim with badges. He wrings water from his cloak hem into the rushes and sighs as if emptying his soul along with it. The dog settles beneath the table, where it begins collecting tribute in crumbs. The inn's windows are small for every reason you have learned, and for one more travel houses are always between worlds. Strangers come and go, goods are stored overnight, horses stand in the yard, coins change hands, arguments ripen quickly. A large window would let in not only wind but attention from the road. Small shutters keep the inn turned inward, making one smoky room into a temporary village for the wet, hungry, and footsore. Outside, rain beats harder. Inside, bowls are passed. You eat pottage thick with barley and leeks, and a strip of smoked fish so salty it may have known the sea personally. The ale is sour but warming. A carter near the fire removes one boot and discovers his foot still attached, which cheers him greatly. Medieval optimism often begins with modest findings. As evening approaches, the innkeeper orders the shutters checked again. A boy stuffs moss into a crack beneath one frame. Another wedges cloth near the door. Straw is spread near the threshold to catch mud. Wet cloaks are hung on pegs, steaming in the heat. A man claims that if wool dries too quickly by the fire, it stiffens and loses strength. Another insists this is nonsense invented by people who enjoy wearing damp clothing. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. But everyone shifts closer to the hearth anyway. You watch the tiny windows glow from candlelight reflected on horn panes. They blur the rain outside into moving shadows. There is no view worth keeping tonight. Only weather. Only darkness. Only the road waiting with its puddles and uncertain bridges. A broad window would show you more of that misery, which seems unnecessary. The small windows offer a kinder arrangement. They admit proof that the outside exists, but not enough detail to damage morale. Later, when the wind rises sharply, the whole inn seems to brace itself. The thatch whispers, the shutters rattle, the door groans in its frame. Someone near the hearth crosses himself. Someone else says the hinges need tallow. Both may be correct. You think of the castle gatehouse watching the road, the great hall holding smoke and heat, the village cottages sheltering goats and children, the abbey scriptorium guarding its careful light. Now this inn teaches its own lesson. On the road, shelter must be quick, compact, repairable, and stubborn. Tiny windows help a building become stubborn. The innkeeper moves through the room with a candle, checking latches, scolding boys, and counting sleepers. She knows every weakness in the walls. She knows which shutter rattles first, which bench leg wobbles, which guest is likely to snore like a damaged horn. Her knowledge is architecture too, built from habit rather than stone. Night settles. Travellers curl beneath cloaks. The pilgrim removes his badge-covered hat and places it beside his head as carefully as a knight setting down a helm. He tells you, softly, that one shrine ahead is said to cure aching joints if you walk around it 3 times before dawn. He also admits the cure may simply be that walking warms the knees. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the miracle belongs to the saint or the exercise. You lie near the wall, wrapped in your cloak. The tiny window above you is shuttered tight. Wind presses outside, but only a thin sigh enters. The room remains smoky, crowded, imperfect, and warm enough. That phrase again. Warm enough. Safe enough. Dry enough. In the Middle Ages, enough is no small gift. Before sleep takes you, you hear rain ticking on the shutter like fingertips. The dog breathes beneath the bench. The fire settles into embers. Somewhere beyond the inn, the pilgrim road runs through darkness toward more fields, more shrines, more bells, and more little windows glowing in houses where people have shut out the storm one careful latch at a time. Before dawn, the inn still sleeps in layers of smoke, wool, and quiet discomfort. You wake not because anyone calls you, but because the wind has found a new note in the shutters. It whistles softly through some narrow crack above your head, not loud enough to frighten, only persistent enough to become part of your dream until you open your eyes. Around you, travellers lie bundled like sacks of grain arranged by exhaustion. The pilgrim with the badge-covered hat mutters in his sleep. The carter near the fire snores with admirable commitment. The dog is pressed against your side, warm as a loaf pulled from an oven and just as unwilling to be moved. The window above you is no larger than a small shield, closed with a wooden shutter and pegged tight. Still, the wind worries at it. You hear the latch tremble. You feel the faint thread of cold air sliding down the wall and across your cheek. It is enough to make you understand why people speak of draughts as if they are living things. In this world, air is not empty. It carries smells, sickness, blessings, curses, weather, and rumour. At least, people say it does. Some swear night air thickens the blood. Others insist damp breezes bring fever from marshes, graveyards, or unlucky wells. No one can quite agree whether illness travels in mist, foul smell, divine displeasure, or the breath of someone who should have stayed home. So, people do what they can. They shut windows. They burn herbs. They keep charms near openings. They avoid sleeping where the moon can look directly at them. Because even moonlight has acquired a suspicious reputation after centuries of people waking up stiff and blaming the sky. You sit up carefully. The fire has fallen low, but one ember glows beneath ash. Near the door, the innkeeper's already awake. She kneels beside the hearth, hair wrapped in a linen cloth, stirring the ashes with an iron rod. She does not notice you at first. From a pouch at her belt she takes a pinch of dried herbs and drops them onto the ember. A bitter, green scent rises at once. Rue, perhaps, or rosemary, or something gathered by someone's aunt under conditions described as important and impossible to verify. The innkeeper murmurs a few words, not quite prayer, not quite charm, something in between. Even now, it is hard to tell whether she fears sickness, bad luck, smoke, or customers with unsettled stomachs. Perhaps all four. The ember catches. Flame returns in a thin orange tongue. The room begins to wake around it. A man coughs. Another curses softly at his boots. The pilgrim opens one eye and declares that dawn is a test sent to humble the proud. Nobody disagrees, mostly because everyone is busy being humbled. The innkeeper moves to the shutter above you and presses cloth into the crack. Wind from the west, she says, as if accusing it of poor manners. Bad for the chest. You ask whether people truly believe draughts cause sickness. She gives you the look of someone asked whether rain makes things wet. Draughts chill the body. Chill invites trouble. Trouble brings priests. This tea is difficult to refute. After a little bread and watered ale, you step outside into morning. The storm has passed, but the road remains wet and shining. Mist lies low across the fields. The air smells of mud, smoke, and crushed grass. The tiny inn windows glow behind you for a moment before the shutters are opened a hand's width to release smoke and admit day. You walk onward with the pilgrim for a while. He tells you of houses where people hang blue beads near windows to confuse the evil eye. He has seen sprigs of hawthorn tied to shutters on May Eve, iron knives laid beneath sills during storms, and little crosses scratched into window frames with candle soot. Some swear these keep witches from slipping through cracks. Others say witches need no cracks at all, which rather reduces the usefulness of carpentry. The pilgrim shrugs. Still, he says, better to latch the shutter. A very medieval compromise. As the road bends through low fields, you begin noticing such protections everywhere. A cottage has a horseshoe nailed above its tiny window. Another has bundles of dried garlic and vervain. At one doorway, a woman shakes out a cloth and tosses water toward the threshold, muttering that bad dreams must be rinsed away before sunrise. Whether dreams obey this instruction is unclear, but the gesture seems to comfort her. Tiny windows are not merely practical openings here. They are borders between inside and outside, warmth and cold, known and unknown, the household and everything that wanders beyond the hearthlight. Medieval people do not live in a world separated neatly between architecture and belief. A shutter keeps out rain, yes, but it may also keep out ill wishes. A latch holds against wind, yes, but iron is thought to trouble spirits. A small opening is easier to guard with wood, cloth, prayer, and superstition alike. You pass a low marsh where reeds bend in the breeze. The pilgrim avoids looking at it too long. He says marsh mist is unhealthy. A monk once told him bad air rises from rotting things and enters the body through the mouth and nose. A village healer told him to wear a pouch of lavender, wormwood, and salt. A barber surgeon offered to bleed him for prevention. He chose the pouch, on the grounds that it involved less bleeding. This seems sensible. By midday, the road enters a hamlet of scattered homes, and you're invited into one while the pilgrim bargains for directions. The cottage belongs to a widow who keeps bees in straw skeps behind her house. Inside, the room is dim but sweet with honeycomb and smoke. Her window is tiny and covered with a horn pane that turns the daylight golden. A strip of red thread is tied around the latch. She notices you looking. For wandering envy, she says. You nod as though this is clear. It is not. She explains that good things attract attention: a healthy child, a full granary, a hive that survives winter. Envy may enter through the eye, and windows are in their way. Eyes of the house. A small window sees less and is seen less. This makes it safer. Perhaps not in the way a mason means safety, not in the way a guard means safety, but in the way a mother, widow, healer, or tired householder understands it. You sit near her hearth and drink warm ale with honey. The dog receives a crust from her hand and immediately appears willing to defend the property against all forms of envy, especially edible ones. The widow tells you that on certain nights she closes the shutter before moonrise. Her grandmother warned that moonlight could sour milk, disturb sleep, or draw wandering souls toward the bed. She laughs while saying it, but when evening comes, she says, she still closes the shutter. Habit is a kind of inheritance. So is fear. So is care. Outside, the afternoon light begins to pale. You thank her and return to the road. The pilgrim has gone ahead, his badges flashing faintly through the mist. You follow at an easy pace, carrying the taste of honey and smoke in your mouth. Around you, cottages keep their small windows half open to the day, yet ready to close at the first chill, the first rumour, the first owl call before rain. You think again of the line between wisdom and superstition. It is not always easy to draw. A tiny window does keep out wind. Wind does chill bodies. Damp rooms do worsen suffering. Bad air, foul smells, spoiled food, crowded sleeping, smoke, fever, fear all mingle in medieval understanding. People may name the causes strangely, but their responses are often rooted in close observation. Close the shutter, bank the fire, hang herbs, keep warmth, avoid the marsh at night. Do not sleep in a draught unless you enjoy hearing everyone say they warned you. The road rises gently toward the west. Clouds part for a moment. A thin shaft of sun catches a cottage window behind you, turning its horn pane briefly bright as amber. Then the light fades. The shutter closes. Inside, someone chooses warmth, privacy, caution, and perhaps a little protection from unseen things. And you walk on, cloak damp at the hem, dog beside you, understanding that tiny medieval windows guarded more than rooms. They guarded the fragile boundary between a household's small circle of firelight and the vast, breathing mystery of the night beyond. The road carries you onward through the fading afternoon, over low hills brushed with winter grass and along hedgerows where the last stubborn leaves cling to black branches. The pilgrim has disappeared ahead, swallowed by distance, mist, or devotion. The dog remains. Of all your companions, it has proven the most reliable and the least interested in explaining itself. By evening, the land begins rising toward another manor estate. Not a great fortress like the castle you first visited, nor a humble cottage hidden among fields, but something between. A stone manor house stands above a cluster of barns and workshops, surrounded by a low wall. Smoke curls from several chimneys. Lanterns glow near the gate. The place looks prosperous in the cautious medieval sense of prosperity. Enough grain, enough livestock, enough roofs that do not appear to be losing arguments with the weather. You are admitted after a brief conversation with a gate servant who seems relieved that you are merely a traveller and not a tax collector. Inside, the household prepares for evening. Servants cross the yard carrying baskets. A groom leads horses towards shelter. Geese complain about everything. The dog immediately finds another dog and begins a discussion conducted entirely through tail movement and mutual sniffing. You are led into the manor house itself. The rooms here feel different from those of the castle. Still medieval, still practical, but softer. The walls are plastered and whitewashed. The furnishings are finer. The hearths burn more generously. And above all, there is a room you have not yet truly encountered, the solar. A servant guides you up a wooden stair. The chamber occupies an upper floor facing south, positioned to gather what sunlight the day provides. Here the lady of the manor spends much of her time reading, sewing, managing household accounts, receiving visitors, and enjoying the rare luxury of privacy. Privacy itself is almost a luxury product in the medieval world. The solar is warmer than most rooms below. Smaller, quieter, more personal, and its windows, though still modest by modern standards, are noticeably more refined. You stop near one immediately. The opening is set deep into the wall but fitted with small glass panes joined by lead strips. Real glass, not abundant, not perfectly clear, yet beautiful. The surface wavers slightly. Tiny bubbles shimmer within it. The outside world appears softened and distorted, as though viewed through water. A woman sits nearby working embroidery beneath the fading light. The window allows enough illumination for her needlework. Not perfect illumination. Enough. That medieval word returns once more. Enough. The lady of the manor herself enters a short while later. She wears a fur-lined gown and carries a ring of keys that rivals the steward's collection back at the castle. Keys, you are learning, are symbols of authority disguised as practical objects. She welcomes you politely and resumes sorting household accounts. Wax tablets lie before her. Bundles of parchment. Lists of grain. Lists of wool. Lists of expenses. No one can quite agree whether medieval households run on money, labour, or endless lists. The evidence suggests all three. As dusk deepens, servants begin closing shutters throughout the manor. Even in this more comfortable residence, windows remain carefully managed. The lady gestures toward the glass. "Expensive things," she says. "You believe her." Each pane represents labour, skill, transport, and cost. Broken glass is not a small inconvenience. Broken glass is a household event. The Solar's windows therefore serve multiple purposes. They admit light for reading and sewing. They provide views across the estate. They demonstrate status. And yet they remain restrained. No grand wall of glass. No sweeping panorama. Just carefully measured openings. The lady explains that sunlight matters greatly in rooms used for work. Women often spin, weave, embroider, mend clothing, read devotional texts, and supervise servants here. Needles require light. Accounts require light. Eyes appreciate light. Still, warmth remains precious. A large opening would undo much of the room's comfort, especially during winter. The Solar balances competing needs: visibility and warmth, status and practicality, comfort and expense. You sit beside the window and look out. The estate lies below. Barn roofs, kitchen gardens, fields fading into evening, workers returning home, a shepherd crossing a distant slope. The view feels peaceful. Yet even here, privacy matters. The small window lets you observe without feeling exposed. You see the world. The world does not see much of you. That arrangement suits the age. Some swear noble ladies spent hours watching roads from such windows, waiting for husbands, sons, merchants, messengers, or news. Others insist most time is spent managing servants and wondering why inventories never matched reality. The lady glances at her account rolls and laughs softly. You suspect the second explanation has merit. As darkness gathers, candles are brought. Beeswax again. Clean burning. Sweet smelling. Their flames reflect in the little glass panes. The effect transforms the window into a mirror. Outside disappears. Inside becomes visible. Your own reflection hovers faintly among candlelight and shadow. Perhaps this is another quiet function of medieval windows. At night they stop being ways to see out. They become reminders of the room itself. The family, the hearth, the household gathered together. Below, a supper's announced. You descend to a dining chamber where roasted onions, coarse bread, cheese, and pottage await. Conversation drifts from weather to harvest to local disputes involving fences, pigs, and boundaries. 3 subjects that appear deeply interconnected. After the meal, you return briefly to the Solar. The room now glows entirely by candlelight. The shutters have been drawn partly closed over the glass. Not fully, just enough. The lady explains that too much night pressing against the panes feels uncomfortable. A little closure creates coziness. A wonderful medieval concept. Not luxury, not abundance. Simply a sense of shelter. A sense that the world has been reduced to manageable size. The dog eventually wanders in and settles near the hearth. The household cat regards this development with visible disappointment. Ancient tensions continue. A servant closes the final shutter. Iron latch clicks softly. Wind vanishes. The room becomes still. You realize that status may allow finer furnishings and better glazing, but even wealthy households follow familiar principles. Small windows preserve warmth. Small windows protect expensive materials. Small windows maintain privacy. Small windows shape daily life. Only now they also support reading, sewing, accounting, and quiet authority. The lady resumes her embroidery. The needle flashes in candlelight. Outside, darkness covers the estate. Inside, thread passes steadily through cloth. A bell sounds faintly from some distant chapel. The room feels safe. Contained. Human. You think back to the castle's defensive slits, the village cottages, the market stalls, the abbey scriptorium, the roadside inn. Each use small windows differently, yet all arrive at similar conclusions. The medieval world values shelter, not openness, not spectacle. Shelter, and here in the warm upper solar, where glass glimmers softly and candlelight pools across account rolls and embroidery hoops, you see how even comfort itself must pass through a narrow frame before entering the room. Morning arrives quietly at the manor, not with a burst of sunlight flooding through great panes, but with a gradual whitening of the small glass windows in the solar. The candles have long since burned low. The hearth contains only a few sleepy embers. Frost feathers the outer edges of the leaded panes, tracing delicate silver patterns that seem almost too careful to belong to weather. You wake beneath a wool blanket and watch the light gather. It takes time. That is one of the things small windows teach. Day does not rush into a medieval room. It negotiates its way inside. First the glass brightens. Then the wall around it emerges from shadow. Then the furniture reveals itself piece by piece. A stool, a chest, a folded cloak. The dog, stretched beside the hearth with the confidence of someone who has secured permanent lodging through charm alone. Outside, servants are already moving through the yard. Their shapes pass behind the frosted glass, blurred and softened. The world remains partly hidden. It is a gentle way to wake. After breakfast, you prepare to leave once more. The lady of the manor sends a message toward the castle, and since you are already travelling in that direction, the task naturally becomes yours. Medieval logistics often operate on the principle that if a person possesses legs, they may soon possess responsibilities. You descend into the yard. The air bites at your cheeks. Smoke rises straight upward from the chimneys. A sign of calm weather? Or so everyone claims. No one can quite agree whether chimney smoke predicts weather accurately or simply gives people something to discuss before breakfast. The road back toward the castle winds through fields touched by frost. Winter's approach is becoming harder to ignore. The grass crunches softly beneath your boots. The dog races ahead, then returns, then races ahead again, apparently conducting inspections. As the morning progresses, the castle slowly emerges on the horizon. At first it appears as a dark shape against pale sky. Then towers become visible. Then walls. Then those familiar narrow windows scattered across stone. You stop for a moment on a rise overlooking the valley. From here, the castle looks different than it did when you first arrived. Not because it has changed, because you have. At the beginning of your journey, the windows seemed strange, restrictive, almost unfriendly. Now they appear logical, even elegant in their own severe fashion. Every slit, every shutter, every little opening represents a decision shaped by centuries of experience. You continue walking. Along the road stand cottages with smoke rising from their roofs. Their windows remain small. A mill beside the stream has tiny openings beneath its eaves. Even a shepherd's hut near the edge of a wood shows the same preference. Again and again, the landscape repeats familiar patterns. Not because everyone copies castles, because everyone answers similar problems. Weather, cost, security, warmth, materials. The details vary. The logic remains. By midday, you reach the outer farms belonging to the castle estate. Workers gather turnips from frozen ground. A cart creaks toward a barn. Children carry bundles of sticks larger than themselves. Winter preparation fills every task. Storehouses must be stocked, woodpiles expanded, roofs repaired, animals sheltered. And once again you notice the windows. The granaries have almost none. The barns have only what is necessary. The cottages admit modest amounts of light. The castle itself rises ahead, still keeping its narrow gaze upon the countryside. Some swear that older generations feared large openings because evil spirits preferred easy entrances. Others claim practical concerns always mattered more. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, yet perhaps the distinction matters less than it seems. After all, whether protecting against cold wind or wandering spirits, people are still trying to defend the vulnerable space inside their walls. The castle gate admits you shortly after noon. The familiar guard recognizes you, or perhaps recognizes the dog. The dog seems more memorable. Inside, life continues much as before. Servants hurry across the yard. The mason still works near the keep. His apprentice still appears locked in personal conflict with buckets. Certain truths endure. You deliver the lady's message. The steward accepts it with the solemn expression of a man receiving news that will eventually become paperwork. Your duty completed, you wander through the castle once more. Everything feels familiar now. The gatehouse, the hall, the stairways hidden inside thick walls, the chapel, the narrow corridors, the small windows. You pause beside one overlooking the valley. The recess is deep, the outer opening narrow. Cold air brushes your face. Far below, the road curves through fields and woodland toward distant villages. You can see surprisingly far, enough to watch travellers approaching, enough to observe weather moving across the landscape. Enough, always enough, never excessive. A thought occurs to you. The medieval world is not trying to maximize light. It is trying to balance needs. Modern buildings often chase openness. Bigger windows, brighter rooms, more views, more exposure. Medieval builders pursue equilibrium. A little light, a little warmth, a little safety, a little privacy. Every advantage purchased carefully. Nothing taken for granted. The afternoon passes slowly. You spend part of it in the hall where fires burn steadily, part beside the chapel where candles flicker before relics, part walking the wall walk where winter sunlight glances off distant streams. Everywhere, small windows continue shaping experience. The hall feels intimate because light gathers around the hearth. The chapel feels reverent because darkness surrounds the candles. The watch chamber feels secure because the slit reveals only what matters. The solar feels comfortable because glass admits daylight without surrendering warmth. Each space depends on restraint. Toward evening, clouds gather again. A pale gold sunset spreads beneath them. For a few moments, every castle window catches the light. The tiny openings glow, not brightly, not dramatically, just enough. You stand in the courtyard and watch. The effect is beautiful. Hundreds of years from now, people may imagine medieval architecture as gloomy, dark, primitive. Yet standing here, you understand something different. The small windows create contrast. Because light is limited, it becomes precious. Because warmth is fragile, it becomes meaningful. Because shelter is uncertain, it becomes cherished. The bells begin ringing for evening prayers. One by one, shutters close. Candles appear. The castle turns inward once more. And as darkness settles across towers and fields alike, you realize that change is already coming. Glass will become cheaper. Architecture will evolve. Walls will grow thinner. Windows will expand. Future generations will invite far more daylight into their homes. But tonight, in this castle balanced between old necessity and approaching change, the narrow windows still reign. Patient, practical, watchful, holding back winter one careful opening at a time. Night settles gently over the castle, and you return to the little window where your journey first began to make sense. It is set deep in the stone near a quiet upper passage, not grand, not decorated, not meant to impress anyone. Its shutter stands open only a hand's width, and through that narrow gap you see the last blue of evening fading beyond the fields. Frost has begun gathering along the outer sill. The road below is almost lost in darkness. Somewhere far off, a single cart creaks toward the village, its lantern swaying like a firefly that has taken up honest work. You rest your hand on the cold stone. It no longer feels unfriendly. It feels deliberate. The tiny window holds the night at a distance while allowing just enough of it to be known. A little air, a little view, a little reminder that beyond the walls lie muddy lanes, shuttered cottages, toll booths, abbey bells, pilgrim shrines, smoky inns, frosted fields, and all the small lives you've passed through like a quiet dream. No one can quite agree whether old castles remember every traveller who has leaned into their window recesses. Some swear stone keeps memory better than parchment. Others say stone only keeps cold. Tonight, with the wall beneath your palm and the last candlelight behind you, both seem possible. Below, the hall murmurs with evening life. Bowls are being cleared. Rushes whisper beneath boots. A servant laughs softly near the hearth. The dog, now entirely certain of its place in the world, lies in the warmest patch near the fire and accepts scraps with the humility of a crowned prince. The shutters are closing one by one. Each latch is a small answer to winter. Each peg says not tonight. Not the wind. Not the rain. Not the wandering eye. Not the arrow, thief, draught, spirit, bad omen, or neighbour who asks too many questions. Just warmth. Just shelter. Just the golden breathing circle of the room within. You think of all you have learned without ever leaving the slow rhythm of the road. Tiny windows are not simply signs of darkness or poverty. They are the shape of medieval caution. They keep walls strong beneath heavy towers. They make glass affordable, shutters useful, heat lasting, privacy possible, and defence more certain. They help cottage families sleep through winter, merchants guard their goods, monks soften their light, ladies sew in upper chambers, and watchmen scan the roads without offering themselves to the dark. A wide window belongs to confidence. A tiny window belongs to endurance. And this world, for all its bells and banners, is built mostly from endurance. You close the shutter gently. The iron latch falls into place with a soft click. The passage darkens, but not completely. A candle burns in a wall niche nearby, its flame steady and small. You follow it down the stairs, past stone that has held many winters, past arrow slits and sleeping chambers, past the faint smell of smoke folded into every beam and cloak and curtain. The great hall waits below. You enter quietly. The fire has settled into a deep red glow. Around it, People speak in low voices or not at all. A child sleeps against a rolled cloak. The steward's keys hang still at his belt. The mason sits with a cup of ale, his cracked hands resting at last. Even the suspicious monk from the abbey has arrived with a message and now watches the dog with careful theological uncertainty. Outside, frost thickens on the roofs. Inside, the little windows hold. And slowly, as the hour grows late, the castle becomes less a fortress in your mind and more a lantern stone on the outside. Warmth within, light guarded because light is precious. The bell sounds once more. Soft, slow, almost sleepy. You settle near the hearth, drawing your cloak around your shoulders. The dog sighs against your boot, as if this entire journey has been tiring for it in ways no human could understand. Smoke lifts into the rafters. Candlelight trembles along the walls. The narrow windows are dark now, shuttered and patient, no longer showing the world outside, but keeping safe the world within. The fire lowers itself by degrees, and the room loosens into quiet. The last bowls are stacked. The last footsteps fade. Somewhere high in the wall, wind brushes stone and passes on. It cannot enter, not much of it, not enough to trouble you now. You breathe in warmth and wood smoke. You remember the gatehouse in rain, the glass panel shining green, the frozen manor room, the mason's voice, the market shutters, the abbey's measured glow, the inn against the storm, the widow's amber horn pane, the lady's solar at dusk, all those little windows, all those careful openings, all those small decisions made by people who wanted to last until morning. And morning will come. Not all at once, not flooding in. It will arrive as medieval mornings do, slowly, softly, through narrow places. A pale thread at the shutter edge. A bell beyond the yard. A footstep near the hearth. The smell of bread. The dog waking before anyone else and acting as though it invented dawn. But not yet. For now, there's only the dim hall, the low fire, the thick walls, and the deep quiet of a castle holding itself around you. The world outside grows wide and cold and silver under the moon. But you do not need all of it tonight. You need only this small warmth, this covered bowl of darkness, this little place where the wind is softened and the night is kept politely beyond the wall. So you let your shoulders sink. You let your hands rest. You let the old stones keep their old work. The tiny windows do not open wider. They do not need to. They have given enough, and in that enough you find shelter. The candle near the hearth bends once, then steadies. The rafters above are dark as a winter forest, and the rushes beneath you smell faintly of mint, smoke, and trodden straw around you. The castle breathes in its sleep a timber creak, a coal settling, a distant drip from the eaves, the soft hush of someone turning beneath a wool blanket. Everything becomes slower now, and softer, and less in need of words. You are safe within the narrow light. You are warm enough, dry enough, held enough. The little window is closed, and beyond it the frost may silver the sill, the road may fade beneath mist, and the stars may keep watch over a tower, village, abbey, inn, field, and forest. But here, near the last glow of the fire, nothing asks you to travel farther. Nothing asks you to understand more. The night has done its telling. Let the bells grow distant. Let the smoke climb. Let the old walls stand. Let the tiny windows guard the dark, as they have guarded so many nights before this one. And as the final ember softens into red, and red into shadow, the medieval world folds itself gently away, leaving only warmth, stillness, and the quiet sense that you may rest now.